Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. Sitting in with us today is a man who is not only one of my favorite people on the planet, but is also a dear brother of mine. He is a CHEK professional, having trained at the CHEK Institute for the past 4 years, is the co-founder of an incredible movement here in Boston called Ice and Iron, which hosts monthly meetups designed to help people become aware of all aspects of their health and feel supported in their life path. He is a passionate, prophetic speaker of holistic health wisdom, is a proponent of the responsible use of psychedelic medicines, and was episode number 1 on the Highly Optimized podcast. So please help me in welcoming my brother in arms, Eddie Madden, to the show. What's up, Ed?
Happy to be here, buddy.
Hell yeah, dude. Give it a pound.
This One Time on Psychedelics.
Yeah, man. It's going to be a fun ride, dude. I'm really excited for this. And for everyone listening, this is the first episode I'm doing on my new kit, and we're doing this at Eddie's house. And shout out to my sound guy, Shlomo. He hooked us up good with helping us out, so props to him. So, a great place that I love to start most episodes is really figuring out how you got introduced to psychedelics and the path that got you from hearing about them to experimenting for the first time, right? So I know for me, I had a lot of, programming, putting me from the DARE program and all of those things that drugs are bad, right? Anything that messes with your consciousness is bad. And that was a big hurdle for me to get over. And so I'd love to hear your process of getting through that and what you discovered on the other side of that.
Thanks for such a thoughtful question. I originally was introduced to psychedelics as a recreational activity as a teenager, using them irresponsibly with no intention, putting psilocybin magic mushrooms on a slice of pizza and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, not knowing how many I'm actually putting on the sandwich, and then just kind of blasting off into 4 or 5 hours of confusion and also some divine realizations that I didn't really know how to process at the time. Then I probably took about 10 years off, and then I became more interested in the therapeutic value of psychedelics from listening to people like Ram Dass and Paul CHEK. And then I was able to restructure my whole relationship and intention with those sacred medicines. And that really helped me because now I kind of eliminated the confusion. Not to say that there's not confusing moments when you're in a journey, but I was able to break up and step back in. And it was nice.
I love that, man. And, it's really interesting because when I first started experimenting with psychedelics, it was very same. Like I would use mushrooms. That was mostly my medicine at that time. And when I would use them, it was like, I don't really know what we all thought we were doing, at 2021. But it was really interesting because I had some really prophetic things happen to me. Like I remember one time I was using mushrooms with some friends, and it was when my dad was going through his cancer treatments. And I was struggling a lot with life after death and all of these things. And I remember one time we ate an extremely potent batch of mushrooms. I really don't know what it was. I can imagine it might be penis envy or something that had a very high psilocybin content. But it was interesting because I went to an area that was full of golden light. And I remember coming out of it, and for anyone listening, I imagine you know exactly what I mean, where when you're in it, it's real. And then as you come out of it, it starts to become more like, third person almost, like, oh, I did feel that, but I don't know if I really feel that now because the ego comes back in and everything. And, it's interesting that we both went down that path of, using them, irresponsibly to using them and then having that like, whoa moment where it's like, okay, this went deeper. And, how I think about this really is like, I think of it like a map on StarCraft, if you remember StarCraft, right? Where like at first you have your village and then everything outside of that is like black, right? And as you explore, more and more becomes lit up, right? And so as I went down my self-development path, I ended up being able to use psychedelics to go farther, right? Because I was aware of more, right? And that's what they talk about with one of the things I think psychedelics is the best at, which is actually allowing you to expand your consciousness and integrate it into your daily life, right? So that now in meditation, I can get to places that I otherwise didn't know existed without first being introduced to it through psychedelic medicines. Did you find something like that happen to you too? That as you started doing inner work, like meditating, breath work, things like that, taking care of yourself, holistic health, that you were able to go farther and then integrate it back into your daily life in a more efficient manner?
Absolutely. When I think of using psychedelics, and I want to really frame everything I say here with you, I'm obviously always honest. I have nothing to hide. But I want to frame it for the beginner. Or I want to give someone who's nervous, interested, curious, something to chew on. So when I think of psychedelics, I think of them as a tool for permanent perception adjustment. Because when you're deep in the journey, things are happening. You don't even know if you're going to remember what's happening. You don't really know. You don't have a context to relate what's happening to what was happening before the journey or after the journey. But the thing about, and I think I'm really just talking about mushrooms right now, is that they alter your perception permanently.
Yes.
It's a permanent perception
shift.
Improvement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you said with StarCraft, the areas are, you only have such a limited perception. And then what these helpers do, these magic helpers that are natural and gifts from the universe, I would like to say Earth, but I think that they predate Earth.
Yeah.
They help widen your perception. They change your perceptions. That way you can see things that are going on in your life, in your relationships, your goals. You just get to, take a different view, which I think is really important. That's why I love them. I think whether you're, going through something that's new or you're stagnant or you just need you're just looking for a different perception or a different point of view rather than asking someone else what they think. You're just getting their perception. You could go into an intentional mushroom journey and you could literally work and adjust your own perception. So that way you don't have to you take someone else's. You get to literally do it and change your own and improve and expand your own perception.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, which is life is not an observation sport, right? You got to go live it, right? In the wise words of Joe Dierte, life's a garden, dig it, right? And for everyone that is a Joe Dirt fan, reaching out to you. But, I think this is where, or I imagine this is where religion has got thrown astray, right? Because what I see religion starting as is people having these journeys, whether, using medicines or not, and then writing them down. Right. And I think the best way that we can use things that are written down is to read it and go, let me find out for myself. And then you go into that experience and you either experience something similar or something different. And I think where religion is kind of run amok right now is that people are now reading about other people's direct experiences with God or source, universe, whatever you want to call it, but they're not in many cases having that experience for themselves. And so I'm curious, with regards to that statement, right? And psychedelics becoming more popular right now, why do you feel more people are interested now in having that direct experience with everything going on in the world right now? I'm curious to hear what you might feel is the reason that psychedelics are now having a second wave of popularity. We know the first one was through the 60s, and I had a really interesting take with that guy, Dr. Steve Young, that was on last week, where he was basically saying the thing that went wrong in the 60s is that they pretty much just wanted to tear down everything, right? And they kind of made a divide and conquer once again. Whereas now it's much more focused on the all. That's how I see it. And so I'm curious why you feel that things are getting so popularized now.
We're thankful for scientific research. I think science has helped to break down the negative stigma, the DARE officer,
yes.
The gateway drugs, because they're a naturally occurring substance. And I think science, you have maps, you have guys like Terrence McKenna and guys
John Hopkins.
They just dedicated so much of their life to showing that there's real benefits here. There's medicine on this planet that can be used for some of the trauma that we've all experienced, unique traumas, and that can help us understand our trauma, understand our goal. It's another tool. Everyone wants you to go into the doctor's office or the hospital to get the tools, but there's tools that are growing naturally all around us. And I think that's one of the science, technology, and the evolution of us as a species just becoming more open and curious and not listening to what everyone wants us to think, not thinking the way they want us to think. I think it's the greatest time.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. I agree. I'm famous for saying, we live in the best time, right? And it either gets better or worse from here, depending on what side of the coin you choose to look at. Yet, when you look around, we're really living in the best time because we have all the technological advancements, right? Which a lot of times are running amok, right? Like, for instance, electromagnetic frequencies and the impact those are having on our human biofield, and people kind of overstepping that because it's not quantitative in nature, it's more qualitative. Oh, I can't see my human biofield being interrupted, so therefore it doesn't exist, right? And I think that's perfect evidence of the evolution from humans being right brain dominant back in the days of, the ancient Egyptians and the Romans and the Greeks and things like that. And then transitioning more over to left brain, right? So only what we can see is reality. And the funny thing is that visible reality is only 4% of what's actually out there, right? And so, one of the big aha moments I had with psychedelics when I was first starting to use them responsibly was oh, I'm actually seeing what's all around me. I'm not tripping. I'm not seeing things that aren't there. I'm actually seeing what is there, which is normally filtered out with consciousness. Because, Paul CHEK's famous for saying, consciousness is a psychic substance produced not blindly, but in living awareness of opposites, right? So it's doing the best with the information it has. It's hey, Eddie, you don't need to, see all these wave patterns and everything because it's going to interrupt your ability to survive in the world, right? So it makes sense. And one of the things that I always get a good chuckle over, right, is how it just so happens that the things that allow us to have these experiences are some of the most hard things and hardened things in the world, right? Mushrooms grow from feces, right? Try getting rid of feces. It's not going to happen, right? Ayahuasca vines can grow through cement, right? And I think it was Aubrey Marcus talk about this and say he's yeah, if these medicines do have a consciousness, and they were talking about how they were going to, manifest in this reality, they're okay, we have to come out in things that grow from shit and things that are super hardened, because by the time the monkeys figure out that we're important, they won't have wiped us out. And I think that was one of the funniest descriptions I've ever heard of why, a hypothesis of why these things grow like that. And, it brings me to a good point, which is with these medicines, and I'm careful to say the word medicine, right? Because that's a label I'm putting on it, right? Dr. Steve Young said that too. Maybe I want them to be medicine in this scenario, right? But maybe I want them to be a teacher. Maybe I want them to be a companion, right? Maybe I want them to hang out with me, right? And so that's one thing too. So, I'll choose to use plant medicines, but for anyone listening, choose your own adventure with this, right? Put whatever word on them you want. But with these plant medicines, I personally have found in my own experience, and also one of the main reasons I created this show, was because with this rise in popularity and with celebrities now endorsing using these things, and a lot of people at a very low developmental level, I feel it's paramount to make sure that people that are listening to this and people that are interacting with the world of psychedelia understand and understand that these medicines are really not for everyone, right? And that being said, I like to chat about the things that have gone astray, right, when we've had these experiences. And so I'd love to chat with you about some of the things that maybe went, I'm careful to say the word wrong, because what is wrong really, but But for sake of context, like things that have gone astray, things that have gone wrong, things that, you can look back and chuckle at, but maybe someone who's listening to this that is a new user should watch out for, right? Maybe things they wouldn't think of, so I'm curious what you'd say about that.
Well, yeah, this one time on psychedelics. Well, when things go wrong, it's because you get, like you like to say, we get into those thought loops. And before I go into that, I'd like to just say that I'd like to echo that these teachers, these medicines, they're not for everybody. You got to really feel the call. You got to really feel the call inside your heart that says, I think I want to check something out that's new. I want to check out this experience, or I want to check out a dosage that's new. You got to set the scene for yourself. You got to make sure that you don't have people coming by wherever it is that you're staying. Because I like to take them during the day. So what can happen is unexpected guests can arrive and they're looking for regular you, and you're in a different area of the galaxy. That can really happen. But, I have to say that I've been very intentional with my use of them. And I just take exquisite care to make sure that I'm in a pretty safe environment. A typical journey for me would be, and like you asked me before, do I like to use any, practices, any spiritual practices with these? So what I'll usually do is I'll take I'll put mushrooms in lemon juice, lime juice, orange juice, let it sit for a half an hour. Then I'll take that and then I'll sit in meditation. Just sit in meditation, because I say I want to go into stillness and silence, and I want to watch it come on. I want to feel it come on. Like really see, am I feeling something? Then I'll put, what I love to do is play East Forest. Right? So then I'll go from meditation once I know what's happening. All the, the teachers are coming in. I'll put the music on. Then I'll just lay down and just let the music take me. But then what I like to do is then I just start going off. I'll just go out into the woods. That's where I like to be. Things can go wrong. Some things that can go wrong where, I was trying to hop a river once. It wasn't like a big river. It was kind of like, it's like 10 feet. It was night. It was pouring rain and, just didn't make the jump. But then you just get in there and it's like, where are you? And it's pouring rain. I love using mushrooms in the rain. Yeah. It's a big part. I have like a mushroom rain suit that's always ready to go. But like trying to, you can just get in it. Once you get into an unstable environment, whether you slip and fall or you're in a claw, you're looking for something, even like in a drawer, you just get caught, fixated into an environment. You can just get stuck there. And I have to say, Ryan, I haven't had a lot of crazy, like really traumatic experiences with the teachers, honestly. Challenging moments come. Even sometimes, like, I'll see people that know me and I'll be like freaking out, like, oh my God. Like I remember I was in Big Sur and I was working and I was off work, but I was still on the grounds of the retreat center where I was working. And some of my coworkers were in between a shift and we had the day off. And two of my bosses and someone else, we're just walking during the day, just, like nothing's wrong. And I'm like freaking out, like just trying to keep it as calm as possible. And then I'm just like dwelling on that for like, God knows how long. Could have been 5 seconds, could have been 50 minutes. But then the funny thing is the next day they say, we had no idea.
Yes.
So you kind of just make a fuss out of things. It's all in good fun. I just think it's all fun. I can't really answer your question with a huge traumatic experience where things kind of went wrong. I would love to hear you give me an example of something where things went really wrong.
All right. Yeah, I don't believe I've shared this story on this podcast yet. So I can think of one, right? And when I say like, gone wrong, I guess I have had a slight situation like that. I'll tell that one after. But the one that immediately comes to my mind was at a music festival, first day. And I decide, I convince my friends, I'm like, hey, listen, this guy next to us, he's got some LSD. We should totally buy some, right? And take it. And they're all like, like taking acid the first day of a festival, usually not a good idea because you don't know the way around yet. All these things, yada, yada. I'm like, it'll be fine, right? And if anyone's listening and you have a friend like that, don't always listen to them, all right? Game recognized game. And so we dose and we start walking around and starts hitting us and almost to a point where we can't even function. Bouncing off of trees, just unable to really see reality as it is usually. And so long story short, we end up going back to camp, right? About 4 hours into it. We're like, we just need to regroup, right? So we get back to camp and there was no danger or anything like that. We knew we were safe. It was more so just people are trying to talk to me and I really just can't even remember how to talk. So I was like, we got to go back to camp, regroup. So we go back to camp and we're hanging out. And the way that our cars are parked at this festival, the car is right next to our tent. So if someone's walking by, they can tell what state we came from, right? And so they're walking by and they're like, oh, you guys are from Massachusetts. Whereabouts? And so I say my town name and they're like, oh, me too. And I'm like, interesting. And it doesn't really hit me. And I'm like, oh, cool. What part of that town? They're like, oh, this part. I'm like, that's the part I live in, right? And we're in Michigan, right? So this is not anywhere near where I normally live. And then I'm like, oh, what street? And then he says the street name. And I'm like, that's my street. And at this point, these things happen specifically on LSD. I don't know why. I've had a lot of different encounters like this where something just so strange happens that you can barely even make sense of it in the normal waking state, let alone when you're, journeying. And so I had a moment where I got really paranoid because I was like, who followed me out here? I just, the mind likes to go where the mind likes to go. Long story short, the guy ends up living 8 houses down from me, right? And really cool guy. There was no paranoia needed. He was totally fine. But it was just one of those really interesting times where nothing actually went wrong, but a lot seemed to go wrong. And I think that's actually what is more likely to happen on psychedelics is that nothing is actually wrong, right? It's just like you said, right? You passed by someone and it ruined your life for 15 minutes, right? And that is I think actually what I wanted to get at is perceived things, right? What the monkey mind can run with, right? Because depending on how much you're dosing, your ego is still coming in at a certain point, right? And especially survival mechanisms are coming in. Should you be afraid right now? Is there a tiger out to get you? Those kind of things. And, so that was one instance where things went a little awry. It was more so a cosmic giggle more than anything when I look back on it, because there was about 30 minutes where I just felt out of my body a little bit because I was trying to use my normal brain, but that brain was not really functioning the way it was supposed to because I'd taken a medicine. The medicine's working. So I was trying to use constructive thinking skills and it just was not working. And so eventually I just had to override. And by override, that's one of a mantra that I use. And for anyone listening, if you find yourself in a position where your mind is starting to run amok, a mantra that I use that I love, and Dave actually has it on his combo board, is I took the medicine is working, right? This is exactly what I intended before I took it. Go with it, right? And I think that's one of the most important lessons that psychedelics have taught me is the freedom in surrender, right? And so I'm curious, what you may have used surrender for in your life, right? Because that's something that for me does not come easily. Negation, acknowledged, and accepted, right? I know you're a go-getter too. And sometimes just admitting, okay, I surrender is really challenging. And yet psychedelics can bring us to that point. So the first part of the question that I have is, have you been brought to that point on psychedelics before where maybe you're like, wow, this is more than I expected. All right, surrender. It doesn't have to necessarily be a challenging episode, but anytime that you've used surrender in a psychedelic journey to propel you forward or to allow you to relax or to give you a sense of freedom.
Yes. I can think of one time when surrender came up. It was a really hot day. It was a full moon. And my intention was to start meditation and then listen to East Forest. East Forest is I would call him a music producer, composer, musician, artist who creates some beautiful music and spent a lot of time with Ram Dass after the stroke. And he creates the most beautiful music. So meditation, music, then I just start going, walking. And my plan was to get to a good spot where I could enjoy the full moon, because it was a full moon night. So I really wanted to just take inventory of all the things that were going on in my mind, in my awareness, and just get a better handle on it, kind of make some decisions on, what needs to be let go of, what I need to surrender to. And funny, Ryan, it was so hot, dude. It was like 95 degrees out. It's dark out. And I was sweating, like probably not sweating as bad. And at one point I was just like, and this is just like a little tidbit, but I was freaking out because I was just soaked, sweating from just walking in the woods, dark out, right? Like just moving. And I was just sweating. And I was like, you know what? You're a water being. You're all water. Like you are wet. Like how could you not? It's just such a silly little thing. It's a silly share, but I was like, just surrender, dude. You're water. This is around the time when I was doing all those water podcasts and reading all these water books. I was freaking out, like I'm fucking sweat. Someone's gonna see me. I'm soaked, and I'm like, just surrender. You're 75% water by mass, 98% water molecularly. Just let it go. You're wet. You're a water being. Just surrender. And then boom, like that whole thought loop just, poof, just done. Yeah. Just surrender. Obviously you're wet. You're water. Just
yeah. Like my smoke lamps are working good, Yeah. Like, something I'd love to hop into too, knowing that, you are a breathwork instructor, you've been a coach for years, you're extremely big into holistic health, something that I value very highly when it comes to using any type of medicine, from anything from tobacco to cannabis to things that, go farther out, is preparation, right? Like I call it my preload and my postload, what I do beforehand to prepare and what I do after to recover, right? And so I'm curious if you have certain things that you like to use before and or after that help you either center in, maybe these can be meditation practices, spiritual practices, or actual products, right? Like, for instance, always drink water before you use psychedelics, those kind of things, right? So I'm curious, what's like, say we were going to do mushrooms right now, we'll pick mushrooms. What would be the first things you grabbed, and why would you use those things?
What I would love to do is fast. So on a couple occasions, I fasted for 1 to 2 days, just water. And then I break the fast with the mushroom tea, ginger, limes, lemons. The reason I would do that is because I just don't want any lingering consciousness from animals I've eaten or any chemical residues creating any distortion in my energy field at all. I just want to try to clear out, hollow out the bone, as they like to say in the jungle and in the cities now. Hollow the bone out, just clean it all out, and then take the medicine after I've been, because you can have negative thought forms and negative energies kind of inhabiting you from food you eat, relationships you have, media you're watching. So what I try to do is really just try to go blank. Like I want to bring myself to the teachers, to the mushrooms, fresh, clear canvas, seemingly clear, right? Clear it out as well as I can. So that way I can really see what comes through. Because when I don't practice a lot, with psychedelics. I would say a couple times a year, but when I do, I get super intentional. Aside from microdosing. Microdosing is used by me and a lot of my family members, and I believe in it. I feel amazing, and I can see people in my family that I love show results. But when I do a bigger dose, a macro dose, if you will, yeah, I really want to take exquisite care of myself, really clean it out, right? Salt, shilajit. Food's not really, I definitely stay away from the food. I guess that's my big answer.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And, it's really like you want to honor the medicine. You want to honor yourself. Right. And that's something that, I feel is so important, especially, like you were saying, depending on where you're getting your meat and things like that. I know you're very big on, everything grass fed and everything as I am, but, a lot of people are unaware of this, right? That, the energies of these animals, especially if they're slaughtered in a really brutal way, can put a lot of anxiety into that meat, right? A lot of tension in it. And you can hear hunters talk about this, right? If they, try to kill an animal and it's not a clean kill, it will like taint the meat, right? And so even if you're looking at it quantitatively, like there's a quantitative measure there. Yeah, the meat is tougher, right? Well, what do you think, moving out of like the physical plane, what do you think is also there, right? And I love that you brought up microdosing because it's one of my favorite ways these days to interact with psychedelics as well. And the research is there, right? And this is the best part about being able to talk about this now is that if anyone tries to, say, oh, I don't believe in that, you can just be like, well, I mean, unless you're working at Johns Hopkins, you're not getting the results I want. So, it's not pseudoscience anymore, right? We're in the mainstream now. I've joked about this before, I believe on this show, but when I saw Gwyneth Paltrow come out with her own show about, psychedelic medicines, I knew I'm like, okay, this is really turning a page here, and really entering the mainstream. And a subject that I like to bring up in every episode because everyone explains it differently. And I feel it's the most important thing regarding psychedelic medicines is the subject of intention, right? And so I'd love to hear in your words what you feel intention is, because my goal with this show is not to necessarily have different subjects every show, because I really feel like the basics, like intentional use, honoring yourself, things like that are so important. And I know in my own development, I could hear something 99 times and the 100th time it's said a different way and it lands. And so that's what I really want this show to be, is a way for people to explain similar things, but in different ways. And hopefully, depending on who's listening, one episode or one explanation of things like intention will land. And so I'm curious how you would define intention and, how you use that in your life at large, right? We don't just have to talk about psychedelics, but, what do you define intention as?
I define intention as person's will according to their attention. Like, what are you willing with your intention? Like, we are free will machines. So I do not have a quick, concise definition of intention. I would say intention is the why, or what is it that you want to get out of a situation. So to use attention is, okay, I don't want to eat. I'm going to make sure no one's home. I'm going to take it at this time. There's going to be a full moon. I'm going to go in the woods. I'm going to wear comfortable clothes. That's the attention. The intention is, what am I intending to create? What am I intending to absorb? What am I intending to learn? Like, what is my true will? What am I willing? Where am I putting my will? Where am I putting my effort? Where am I putting my attention? Because you take your attention. Why am I putting all this intention on this? For example, I intend to learn something about my goals career-wise. Am I on the right path? Would be an example of an intention. What makes me happy? Or intention. I mean, just to really bring it down into an intention invocation that I would use before and do use before any type of sacred sacrament, if you will, is where I give honor with my voice, my heart, and my mind. So I'm setting my thoughts and my visualizations on one thing. Then I'm setting my heart. I really want to feel that one thing in my body. And then I want to use my voice, my sound, and my vibration to let those visualizations in my head and the feelings I have in my heart come through in my voice to speak. Because that is what makes us gods, because we have the ability to speak, as you know, abracadabra.
With my word, I create. Yeah.
So I would say, like, before, an example of an intention is I would give thanks and honor for all the effort that brought this medicine to me. I'm thankful for all the effort and suffering and sacrifices that have got me to this point. My intention today is to give thanks and to call on non-physical helpers to help keep me safe on this journey. Please and I'm not begging, I'm inviting. I humbly bow to all the beings that are aware of this intention ceremony right now, that I am humbly bowing to you, to your power, to your love. Please guide this ceremony. Please guide my journey. May it be safe. My intention is to blank, 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 blank. Learn something about my relationship. Learn something about my career. Figure out what's going on with my body. Figure out, let me think about someone who I lost, a loved one. Whatever it is, blank, blank, blank. Please, 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 beings, may it be safe. That would just be an example of me setting an intention before taking that sacrament.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful and beautifully said. And, a question that I love asking myself, right? If I'm like, what is my intention? What am I where am I going to shoot my cast? Right? Because really, like, the way I think of intention, right, is if you think of the universe, source, God, whatever you want to call it, as pure unconditional love, right? Then what are we? We are the condition, right? So as the condition, we can then put an arrow or a point or cast a fishing rod, if you will, out into that unconditional ocean, right? And then say, I want to go there, right? And so it's actually giving you a roadmap of where you want to go by the end of that experience. Otherwise, you're just floating in the mass and you're just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You're completely overwhelmed and then it's gone. And it's like, it basically was a waking dream, right?
Your whole life can be like that.
Absolutely.
So that's why I like to say great spirit is down for whatever.
Yes.
And I like how you say the cast on intention. So if we think of unconditional love, there is a source of everything. That's unconditional love. That's all powerful, omnipresent, omnipotent, has all the power, has everything. It is, right? Consciousness, all caps, intention. Imagine that there is a manifesting generator, right, out of this realm that is creating everything we want. And we are literally, we're the pen point, right? Intention, to use the analogy of a pen, is the ink. Ink is the unconditional love. And then we are the ballpoint. We're the pen that's writing. And what we need to do is we need to connect to that. The way we connect to the ink so we can create whatever we want to create is with our voice, with our heart, with our mind. So I like to even think like there's a reservoir up in the vastness of nothing, and somewhere in our body, in our mind, in our heart, in our voice, there's a tether. And when you pull it, you're literally yanking on that tether. You're putting tension on that tether. You're literally yanking God, yanking source, yanking you and saying, hey, I'm here and I want to create something. And this is what I want to create. Whether it's thanks for a meal, a safe journey, a new house, whatever it is, we have this creative capability to tap into that. And you just got to pull it and create tension. Say, hey, I'm here. Hey, great spirit, I want to create something. This is what I want to create. Draw it, write it, speak it. Go into a ceremony with that intention to help expand your perception so you can see new opportunities and attract different opportunities. Intention is everything. I could talk about intention for a long time.
It really is everything. I mean, if we think about just life in general, without intention, your life is just a series of events happening to you, not for you, right? Because you're not an active participant in your experience, right? You're essentially think about it this way, right? When you were a kid, I'm sure there were times your dad's like, hey, we're going to this place for Thanksgiving. And you were like, all right, maybe I want to go there, maybe not, right? Well, imagine if your whole life is like that, right? Like, we're currently in a very interesting time in history where just because someone is a certain age does not mean their consciousness level is at that certain age, right? And we're seeing that play out in politics and all these things where it's like these adults are acting like babies, right? Like they're literally acting like 13-year-olds. And it's a very interesting thing. And, the question I love to ask myself before I go into anything, right? Like a glass of water, using biogeometry, eating a meal, using psychedelics is, who am I going to be on the other side of blank, this glass of water, this dose of mushrooms, right? And, really to get into like the language nerd thing real quick too, because it's huge, right? You brought up abracadabra. A big download I had at the retreat we were just at was the difference between, like, for this example, I used cannabis, right? using cannabis versus connecting with cannabis, right? So like, think about it like a relationship, right? Because anything that you are interacting with is a relational ship that can take you together, right? This glass of water, when you interact with it, it's a relational ship that is going to help you become hydrated, right? And so where you want that relational ship to go is up to you, right? And I relate it to relationships, right? If you said, I'm going to go home and use my wife, probably wouldn't come off that good, right? I imagine you'd probably get a couple things thrown at you, right? But if you were like, I'm going to go home and connect with my wife, that sounds amazing, right? Or connect with my plants or connect with nature, right? But if I'm going to use nature, think about how language, we look at a world right now that we're killing more and more topsoil every year, right? Because people are using nature, right? We are using the earth rather than connecting with it, right? And therefore we are using ourselves rather than connecting with ourselves. And you know, there's a very interesting consciousness gap right now between people that understand that they are part of nature, they are an integral part of nature, and people that think they're separate from it, right? And we could get into the illusion of separation and how how that runs amok. But it's very interesting, you know, and I'm glad we got into this because, you know, really, I've never gone this deep in an episode yet about intention, but I feel it's so important because I know for me, I heard about intention and I knew with my brain, I knew what it was, but I hadn't experienced it yet, right? And so an exercise that we did at the retreat that I'd love to give everyone listening to this, right, is maybe you're like, yeah, I totally get this. Or maybe you're like, I don't know what these guys are talking about, right? And so this is an interesting thing to try for yourself, right? Because again, direct experience is the most important thing. And so rather than just speaking about this, I'd love to give people an exercise they could do at home real quick, right? And so we did this after the cannabis ceremony, right? Where cannabis specifically is a revealer, right? It's going to reveal things to you that otherwise you might not want to see, right? And so that's why people can get paranoid, anxious, right? Because they use it unintentionally. They use it unintentionally, and then it ends up using them, right? Where it's like, and then it's funny because a lot of people end up being, and I was one of these people, so I'm not, you know, going off my high horse. Oh, cannabis gave me anxiety, right? So again, related to the relationship, right? Imagine you go home and you just start cooking dinner and you don't ask your wife for what she wants, right? And she's like, I'm really hungry. What are you cooking? And you're like, oh, I'm cooking XYZ. And she's like, you know, I don't like that. And you're like, whatever, right? Imagine what that scenario is going to be like versus coming home and saying, hey, what would you like for dinner? She's like, I don't know. You know, I think I kind of want this. All right, yeah, I'd be down for that. Cool. And then you do it. Same thing with cannabis or any of these medicines. Hey, this is why I'm reaching out. Like, hey, what do you want this experience to be like? Well, on the other side of this, I want to be more in touch with myself and I want to know what the next step of my career path is. Then cannabis or any of these medicines goes, okay, cool. You ready for whatever's going to come out? I'm ready. I surrender. Right. And then you go into this experience. And if you have a challenging time, right, where something becomes paranoia, anxiety, whatever, it's much easier to go, oh, this is all part of it, right? Instead of this is happening to me, this is now happening for me, right? And through me. I am now a channel for these medicines to teach me things through. And that has been one of the coolest things. And so an exercise for everyone to try real quick at home, and you can do this in a sober state too, right? Is right before you go to bed, get out your journal and say, hey, subconscious, and then ask your question, right? So one that I asked, right, was, hey, sub, what does the first week of my new program look like, right? The next day I was teaching a workshop around this subject, cannabis, right? And I was out stretching, just hanging out about 2 hours for the workshop. And I had an idea what I was going to do for it, you know, and I'm sitting there stretching and all of a sudden, boom, just this download comes in clear as day, conversation with cannabis. Right. And I just start getting this huge download like, oh my God, this is a relationship. And all this stuff lands. I put it together. I do the workshop. It lands. Everyone loves it. And I'm like, wow. So that's an example of how you can use intention, even in the normal waking state, to unlock things in your subconscious, because your conscious it doesn't go back as far, you know, like your subconscious is much more wise, right? And so, but there's a lag, right? It takes time to be able to come through. So what I did a lot was I'd be like, well, how do I figure this thing out? And if it didn't come to me immediately, I just, whatever, you know, like I would get it wrong, or I would be like, oh, you know, this is the right answer. And then it would lead me into all this muck. But really, what's one of the main differences between human beings of today and our ancestors? Well, today, I know, speaking for myself, I know you too, especially living in where we do, go, right? We're going. We don't have time to sit and be still, right? That's why meditation is so important and all these things. back in the days of tribal societies, a lot of these different tribes would finish their hunting by 10 a.m. and then they'd have the rest of the day to sit and contemplate. So their subconscious would have time to catch up. We no longer have that in most cases, right? And that's why it's so integral. I heard one of my buddies, the coach, sum it up perfectly. He's like, you could pretty much take any program out there and it pretty much comes down to breathe and journal, and it's like, it's so true,
That is true.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, for you, knowing that you're very much into inner work, very much into journaling specifically, have you used journaling? We'll talk about journaling specifically because I feel as though for me, it was something that I didn't get journaling. I didn't understand it. I was like, yeah, I get what people say, but whatever. And so I'd love to hop into that because I feel as though many other people might be experiencing the same thing I was, where it's like, what is this supposed to do? I could be doing so many other things. I have things I have to do, right? And so I'm curious if you've used journaling at all, either with psychedelics or during your integration process, and what that has opened up for you and what you see the value of journaling just in general being. And then you can also add it into psychedelics if you'd like to.
Huge journaling experiences, profound journaling experiences, actually. So I'd like to just kind of back up a step and say that psychedelics used intentionally is a great intentional experimentation process where if you feel like there's no real magic in your life and you're just okay, you're just, I don't recommend taking psychedelics when you're in the middle of a crisis.
Yes.
Right? But if you're okay and you want to experiment with what is this intentional thing all about, this is the best. Journaling on mushrooms is the best way for me to say that you might experience some magic. So back when I was in the teens, I remember one big download that came through for me was that it was after I said, wow, if only I could journal while on these things, these mushrooms, what would come through would be so amazing. I remember that at a young age, before I found Terence McKenna, before I found Ram Dass, before I found MAPS, all that stuff. But I always remembered that memory. So I remember when I revisited mushrooms, I had markers and I like to bring all kinds of different accessories along in case I need them. And I was laying down on the couch. I was reading Be Here Now, which is an amazing experience. And then something told me, get up, go right. Because I know that you'll hear a consciousness almost inside you that doesn't feel like you, but it's loving and it's helpful. It's encouraging you to do certain things. If I'm walking through the woods, he'll get me off path and he'll bring me to things. But on this journaling, it brought me, go journal right now. And I remember writing down, our thoughts create our reality. Anything you can set your mind to, stay focused on, you can create. Use intense focus, you can create anything. And I'm ad-libbing right now. But then I said, Eddie, if you want to create a home on the mountains, overlooking the ocean, surrounded by redwoods, you can. 10 seconds. Time. Just spend your time focusing on what you want to create. So that was the automatic writing that was coming through. So it happened. 3 years later, I'm on mushrooms. I'm in Big Sur. I'm walking through the redwoods. I go down to this cliff. I sit on a bench. And I hear the voice come back again. It says, see, here you are. Just took a little while. And I had no idea, no intention of going to redwoods. I just threw that out there. That just popped in randomly. So that's a synchronistic moment right there it's a random coincidence. It's a synchronistic moment. It's divine magic. But I had no intention of going to California, Northern California. It just ended up there. And then all of a sudden I was just sitting on the bench whoa, holy shit. I feel like it was just 3 years ago. And I immediately linked. It was the same. It was like, see, now you're here. And they said, now what do you want to do? And how long is it going to take you to create it? So the journaling is big because I think there's an automatic writing channel that opens up.
Absolutely. And, I love that you brought that up. How long is it going to take? Right. And it's funny because when I think about that question, I think about the things I was chatting about a couple of minutes ago where it was like, oh, I can't, and this is me speaking, right? Like, I can't journal. I have things I have to do, right? Well, what are those things? And do I have to do them? Because if I do, am I under the authority of someone else? Like, what do I have to do, right? And who is this person that's making me have to do things, right? And a lot of times what I've found is that person or that persona in me is my ego. And the ego is doing the best with the information it has. Contrary to popular belief, I do not believe the ego is the enemy. And I believe that a lot of what's going wrong, if you want to use the word wrong, in psychedelic medicine right now is a lot of people, the whole kill your ego movement. I think that's terrible. Like, I love my ego. It just needs to, I like to meet with it one-on-one and go, hey, I know what you're doing. You learned that pattern from me. That pattern isn't serving us anymore. Let's be on a team. Let's figure this out. And so that has allowed me to now, my schedule is much more like I never miss meditation. Why? Because meditation is more important than anything. Why? Because it gives me time to focus on what I want to create, and those things actually happen quicker, right? So for anyone listening, be careful of that trap that you can fall into with like, oh, busy work, right? Like, of course, we have a job, whatever, to make money so we can live. I get it. As Ram Dass says, no matter how enlightened you are, you still need to take out the trash, right? But I'm talking about busy work. You get home and you're like, well, now I can do laundry, and then that's done. And, well, now I can clean the house, right? At the expense of tuning into your inner world. Right? Like, what things in your reality are things you actually have to get done right now? Like, you have to be at work on time. I get that, right? But do you have to do laundry today? Or do you have 3 more days available? Maybe you had a really stressful day and you could really benefit from tuning out for an hour, right? And I say tuning out, not on a TV, right? But rather tuning in to yourself, right? I think that's the better way to say it.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I want to use another analogy here to talk about the ego and to connect it to intention. I think analogies are just the greatest way to teach.
My love language.
Yeah, my love language too.
That's why I love you so much.
Love.
Yeah, exactly. You heard it here first, guys.
The ego is a computer. Imagine inside your body, the ego is the computer. Computes things, makes calculations, sets projections, analyzes data. It does a lot, and it's always running. Intention, our intentional organs, if you will, our heart, our ability to, our third eye, our chakras, our body, our whole instrument is an intentional instrument. That's the engine. So what happens when you put a computer in the engine? That becomes a really good car. Yes. Right? But if the computer's not in a car, it's not sitting anywhere. It's sitting at the desk. It's not doing anything. And Great Spirit is down for whatever. So when you can take your ego and you can install that CPU into an intentional machine like our heart, you fuse the ego and your intention. And you can't have intention unless you have core values. So if all this intention stuff sounds crazy, you got to figure out what you value. For example, me, I value community. I value the earth, nature, being outdoors, singing, dancing, sweating, pushing myself, getting out of my comfort zone, and growing. And I'm a lifelong student. So I just take all those. Those are my values. Okay, how can I do that? So I want to make sure that my intention is leading me to grow those areas of my life with quality. But when you take your ego and you partner your ego with your intention, boom, now you're actually going somewhere. And psychedelic experimentation is great for that because it kind of shuts off the ego a little bit. It kind of slows down the processor of the computer. So that way you can it's like a desktop without too much crap on the desktop screen. The psychedelics kind of clear it a little bit. Then you put the intention into it before it starts to take hold of you. Then that's where the magic things can start to happen because you're fusing your CPU, your ego with your intent. I mean, imagine taking the medicine without the intent. Now your ego is just going to go crazy. Now you're just staring at that desktop. Or if you take too much and you drop into the void, now you're all intention. You can't compute anything. You're just in the void. Where the hell am I? You need a little bit of both to find that sweet spot.
Yes, dude. I love that you brought that up, bro. That is amazing. And, a couple things I got from that is that you're 100% on the money. Core values are exactly what they say. They're the core of your experience of life. And shout out to our man, Angelo Cisco. I just went through this exercise with him where I went really deep in figuring out what my core values at this point in my life are, right? And for me, that ended up honor, it ended up liberty, and it ended up trust, right? So how that looks in my reality is I honor myself, I honor my relationships, and I honor my mission, my purpose, right? And with liberty, like I express liberty to myself, right? I free myself from the chains that I put myself into. I liberate my relationships, right? I allow the people that are in my life to live their own life, right? And not get pulled down by, oh, they're doing this to me or any of this stuff. I let them live. And then I keep my mission, my purpose open, right? To be ever evolving, right? Because when we lock ourselves in chains, right? Nothing else to be said there. And then the biggest thing for me is trust, right? I trust myself. Just that, even repeating that. And for anyone who hasn't experimented with mantras yet, take time, power, every day to write down even one sentence, right? And so for me, it's relating to honor, liberty, and trust, right? So I honor myself, I honor my relationships, I honor my purpose, I liberate myself, I liberate my relationships, I liberate my purpose, and I trust myself, I trust my relationships, the people in my life, and I trust my mission, and I trust my purpose. And one of the things here that I feel is another huge, I got this download as you were talking, a huge thing psychedelics have given me, the direct opportunity to experience firsthand, is accountability, right? Like, you know, we can play the blame game, right, if we want to, yet what does the blame game really do? It takes our freedom away. So for me, that was something where I was like, oh, well, that's not me. I liberate myself, right? So accountability, I always relate it when I'm talking with clients or just, you know, philosophizing. You know, what accountability is 30 seconds of sting and a lifetime of freedom on the other side, right? So an example would be when I had a previous job, right? And I was frustrated, right? I felt as though I wasn't being heard. I felt as though I didn't have an outlet to, you know, allow my creativity to go, right? All these things that I was putting on someone else, they're doing this to me, right? When I accepted, hey, you're here because you're choosing to show up here every day. You're not choosing to put in your 2 weeks notice, right? It immediately made me realize none of these people are to blame. They're not doing any of this to me. They're doing the best with the information they have, and they have their own lives, and they're doing what they think is best for their business. And so that was a huge amount of freedom, because then I realized, okay, it's put up or shut up time, Ryan. Either you're going to continue dealing with this, right? And then there's no reason to complain now because you know that you're the one doing this to you, or you're going to take the initiative and do what you know is right for you, take your leave and go do your own thing. And that was huge for me, you know, and I'm curious if you've had instances like that with accountability specifically, and this could be either with psychedelics or without. But I'm really curious to hear that, because I feel as though that's a subject that I don't feel is talked about enough, especially like you think about, you know, we can laugh all day about what grade school teaches you, but, you know, the subject of accountability, how much suffering from my own experience, right, and I can imagine for yours too, could have been avoided by learning about accountability early on in my life. You know, so I'm curious if you've had anything like that, big aha moments with regards to accountability.
Accountability for me is realizing that I am the master of my domain and that I'm not victim to anybody or anything. And if I want something to change, I need to change it. I can't wait for someone else. If I want to change my body, I have to change my body. If I want to change my income, I have to change my income. I can't play the blame game. And if you're having trouble managing your life, psychedelics are not going to help. I bet a lot of people probably see this and they're like, oh, maybe I can take some big mushroom journey and I'm going to figure everything out. You might figure a couple things out, but the mess is still going to be there when you come to. So for anyone that's listening, like I said, I want to really try to frame my experience for the beginner. If you're having trouble managing your life, adding things is definitely not the way to start. I would start subtracting things like food, like activities. Make sure you're working and spending your time aligned with who you want to become, or time spent aligned with your core values. I think, you know, I don't use these recreationally. I don't use cannabis recreationally. It's very once in a while. I'm a real once in a while user of all this stuff. I try to really do it as intentionally as possible, especially with psychedelics. And I don't expect my world to be fixed. Actually, I expect to have new work to work on, which requires more accountability. So I really do think that even though John Hopkins and MAPS and all this new awareness is coming out around psychedelics, that doesn't mean that we as a society are ready. We're really not. We need to make sure that we're cleaning up our space, wake up, clean up, grow up, show up, right? We got to clean up, and a psychedelic is a grown up medicine. It's a grown up substance. And a lot of us are kids in adult bodies. And if you're having trouble managing your life, cannabis isn't going to help. A mushroom journey isn't going to help. I think it's really, you need to make sure you clean the table, clean your desk before you're going to really go into this sacred ritual, because it's not a ritual for a lot of us. So you got to go in real easy, especially when the doses start going up. So you got to make sure that, and if you're not accountable, you might realize that you're in a chaotic atmosphere. Things are really chaos. You don't know who you are. You don't like who you are. You don't like what you're surrounded by. You don't like what you're doing. That's just chaos being brought to the surface that you've been suppressing down. So accountability is everything. No one is going to help you be accountable. We have to do it. We have to dig the hole. And one more analogy, it's like my shovel analogy. You're getting ready to dig a hole. You get a great shovel. You put a gold handle, great wood. You spend a year making the shovel. You get all kinds of shovel experts and biomechanists to come through and show you, all right, you're going to dig the hole. You probe the land. All right, everything's good. You make space. Eventually, when you're done reading the books and talking to the experts and setting your intention, guess what? You're going to end up digging the hole. It's time to dig. No one's going to dig for you. You're going to dig the hole. And that's what accountability is. We got to make sure we're doing work, and we got to make sure we're doing the right work, because this deep work is not entry-level work.
Yes. I love that you brought that up, because this is a challenge that I fell into at one point, and I know a lot of people that I've spoken with and coached on this have fallen into as well, which is, I just need another big experience. I need another PEAK, peak experience, right? And so you go down a journey of mushrooms, and let's talk about best case scenario. You have all these downloads. You have all these aha moments. You're really breaking through, it feels like, right? Yet if you have not set up the integrated process, right, meditating, breath work, being kind to yourself, eating high quality food, drinking water, surrounding yourself with the right people, all of these things, then what's going to happen? You're going to fall directly back into all the patterns that you don't like about your normal life, and then you're going to need another PEAK experience the next weekend. Versus if you're actually creating intention, you're accountable, and you go into this experience knowing, hey, this is my intention, and I'm ready for whatever the universe offers me. I'm ready for whatever these teachers offer me. Then from there, you can come out of that and actually integrate it, right? And what is integration, right? Like, for me, what I feel integration is you have an experience, and this could be anything from drinking a glass of water to having a full-on psychedelic experience. But let's talk about psychedelics for sake of conversation. Say if you do mushrooms and you're like, wow, I love myself a lot more during that. Like, I really showed myself compassion. Okay, so when you come out of that experience, something you could do is write down 5 ways you're going to show more compassion to yourself on a daily basis, right? I'm going to allow myself to go to sleep earlier, right? I'm not going to eat 3 hours before bed. I'm going to drink enough water. I'm going to say no more. I'm not going to overextend myself. That's been a big one for me. And so what you do is then you practice those things every day. And then all of a sudden one day you're meditating, you're talking to someone, and you realize, oh my goodness, I'm really showing myself compassion. Maybe an example is someone's like, hey, Eddie, we're going to New York tomorrow. We're going to see this show, someone you really like. Do you want to come? And in your head, you're like, man, I'm really burned out, but I got FOMO, The old pattern would be like, yeah, I want to go. Done, right? I want to be the man. I want to do it. The new pattern might say, guys, do you want me getting vulnerable with you for a second and sharing something? And they say, sure. And you go, I have a really challenging pattern that I'm looking to overcome right now that makes me say yes, to a lot, and I'm really trying to, reverse that pattern. And so I hope you honor my no with me on this. It's not that I wouldn't want to go with you guys. I would love to go, I'm going to party my ass off and have a great time. But right now I don't have the energy to be able to come full force and be able to show up in my life, my relationships, the things that matter to me. And then if those people are right for you, they should high five you and say, we love you, dude. We'll be raging with you in spirit. And that's how integration works and how I look at it, And I'm curious, what integration looks like for you. Like maybe what are some things you've used to integrate? We could talk again about meditation, anything like that. But even moreover, just the idea, the concept of integration, what does it mean for you? Because I feel as though for most people I meet, it's different, right? Like I know for me, it's different than it is for you. The process looks different. So I'm curious, like say you just went through a big experience, right? And you're coming down and it's time to start thinking about, what you can do to take those things you just discovered, those aha moments, those downloads, that full version of yourself that you experienced, your higher self, and integrate it into your lower self, right? Your ego, so that then you guys can work together. What's your process look like?
I love the question. It's deep and it's great. I also love knowing you know. You have to know I know.
Yes. Your guess has no power till you learn to say no. One of my favorite quotes.
So integration for me, after a psychedelic journey, I'll use an analogy of binoculars. So we're usually walking around with a little kitty pair of binoculars all the time, and that's what we use to look at things. Well, sometimes when you get a psychedelic journey under your belt, you have upgraded your binoculars. Now it's like aliens just came down and they put some super green crystal glass lens in there. You don't even know how they got it in there. And now they just slapped it in there and like you're looking through it and you're like, oh my God, this is like what an amazing set of binoculars is. I can see things in me. I can see things outside of me. I can look at things like I said in the beginning. It's a perception expander, right? It's expanding your perception. It's making you see things different. So the integration, it's like, all right, now the journey's over. I get these new binoculars. I need to, let me make sure that these things are clean. Where am I going to carry these? Where am I going to put them? It's like having a way to compartmentalize this new ability to perceive. That's my integration. And you can't just continue to walk around with those binoculars on all the time. You got to just have your new realizations down, keep them organized, journal, write some things down, do a brain dump, do a little drawing. I like to draw. A lot of, that helps me integrate drawing after a journey.
Yeah, mandalas.
You just get so much, and I wouldn't say that you forget, because I can still remember things that I thought about 10 years ago, but it's a profound tool to just enhance your perception. And I think you have to really be careful with how you handle that new perception. You got to stay calm and write it down and process it and really use your ego to really understand what this intention ego machine just brought you with these new perception binoculars. Really say, whoa, okay, these are the things that I thought about. What does this mean? Take a download, write the download. I'm going to just write for 5 minutes on my phone timer on what that download actually means and just keep excavating into it. That's my integration, to really get to know the gifts that were given to you during the journey, get to know them with your regular consciousness. That's what I think integration is all about, just to get to know it more.
I love that, man. And I love that analogy too of the binoculars, and for anyone who maybe was listening to this that hasn't done psychedelics and is like, I'm curious what they're talking about, think about a dream, right? With the second you wake up after having a dream, you remember it like it's an actual memory. But 10 minutes later, an hour later, 8 hours later, you barely remember any of it, right? And that is a extreme example of what I have experienced on psychedelics, right? Of course, I still remember things, right? It never goes away fully. But a lot of the interconnected parts that make it the vision it was, the aha moment it was, the download it was, leave pretty quickly, right? And so for me, the reason why I love journaling, the reason why I love meditating, right? Like journaling allows me to remember what happened, what feelings I was feeling. Then meditation allows me to enter back into there, and then breath work centers me into that feeling, right? So I can then take it on and bring it into my new waking state of reality. And man, I really feel as though since I've begun integrating, and really creating a practice around integrating, it's like my amount of journeys I need is almost none at this point, right? And the amount that I need to use went way down. I mean, I can have an experience on a gram of mushrooms now that I would have had on an eighth or more when I was, 10 years ago, first starting to experiment. It's so funny, right? And it really, that is, in my opinion, the evidence, right? That things are working, right? Now, again, another way I like to say this, right, is say we're using the term plant medicines, right? Well, say if you're using a medicine, right? Like we'll use a pharmaceutical, for instance, like an antibiotic, right? Which we won't even get into that. But let's just say for sake of conversation, guys, we're using an antibiotic. There's a certain way to use that medicine, right? And you don't just decide one day, I feel pretty good, I'm going to take an antibiotic, right? There's a specific reason which can state as intention, right? Like, oh, I have this sickness, this virus, whatever going on inside of me, this illness, right? And so you use this with the intention of this is going to make me better, right? This is going to help me feel better. And then at the end, right, when you're now better, you don't keep using the medicine, right? And this is what Terence McKenna talked about when he spoke of when you get the call, hang up the phone, or when you answer the call, hang up the phone, right? And it's kind of like how, again, you don't need another PEAK experience. You need to integrate your PEAK experiences into your life, right?
When you get the message, hang up the phone.
Yes, when you get the message, hang up the phone. I knew I was getting it a little bit different, but thank God. I knew you'd have it if I didn't. And, it's like, it's funny because I feel as though a lot of people are not making the comparison. I'll put it in my experience. I was not making the comparison between my life and the psychedelic experience, right? So when you go into a psychedelic experience, there are times that you might feel anxious. There are times that you're crying. There's times you're laughing so hard you can barely breathe, right? And that's very similar to life. It's like a very concentrated version of life. So if you don't like what's showing up in your reality, look at what you're choosing unconsciously, right? So in that same wavelength, if you're using psychedelics to escape and to leave your reality, then nothing is going to end up changing, right? It's the same thing as using alcohol or anything, food, anything, right? And that's where I feel like you were talking about earlier, society has a long way to go until this can be used like in the mainstream. And that's the number one, like if there's one reason I started this show, it's because like, listen, psychedelics have been extremely impactful for me. And I got very lucky using them the way I used them when I first started, right? Luckily, I knew enough about set and setting where I wasn't taking them like in very hazardous situations, but I had no idea what I was messing with, right? And this is where, again, you're opening yourself up. And when you open yourself up, if you don't have the rituals, right, you wonder why we have the 7-directional prayer and Florida water and all these things. It's because you're opening up your armor and entities can then come into you and say, hey, I want to hang out with you. You're a healthy guy. You're 30 years old. You're crushing it. You have a lot of energy. I want to suck that energy out of you, right? It's kind of kinky if you think about it in a way, right? You got to keep a degree of humor with this, right? And, but it's very impactful. And that's where I feel the thing that I get nervous about when it comes to psychedelics and people just taking them willy nilly is that most people are not even aware of anything except what they see, right? 4% of visible reality, right? So then they're taking a medicine that opens them up. They have no idea. It's almost like if you got into a race car and decided to go on a track with professional drivers and you're just like, I'm just going to wing it, versus someone teaching you how to drive the car, right? Teaching you how to drift behind a car, teaching you if someone's drifting behind you. What happens if they bump you? Should you turn left? Should you turn right? If you start spinning out, where do you look? Not the wall, right? Because that's where you're going to go, right? So all of these things I feel are so important. One of the reasons why I love having people like you on, because we can talk from direct experience. But, one of the things I want to mention to everyone listening is this is Eddie and I's direct experience, right? And so you can definitely take notes, take, tips, whatever. And if you're very curious about trying these medicines, my best recommendation is finding a facility, finding a facilitator that's experienced, that knows what they're doing to guide you in this, to show you the way to do it. Because otherwise, best case scenario, you're just going to have an experience that confuses you. Worst case scenario, it could impact the rest of your life in a very strange, nihilistic way, right? And that's something I really wanted to throw in there. Like, again, life is not an observation sport. You got to go observe it for yourself, right? Or you got to go live it for yourself. And so that's something I wanted to throw in at the end here because I feel it's so paramount, to make sure that we're being cautious, right? We're respecting and honoring these medicines because they are so grown up and they are very powerful and they can do a lot of great things and they can also do a lot of harm. Or rather, we can do a lot of great things with them or we could do a lot of harm to ourselves with them. And so, man, this was such a fun ride, man. We fucking did it. Give me a fist pound.
We talked about perception. We talked about accountability. We talked about intention. I think it's really about just understanding your own consciousness. And if you don't understand your consciousness, your core values, where you're going, why you're in the environment that you're in, If you don't understand those things, a big, giant, powerful extraterrestrial set of binoculars isn't going to help you.
Yeah.
You got to make sure you know how to drive. You got to make sure you can handle it. And that's what it's all about. I think that you're spreading great messages here. I think it's great content. Everyone's curious about, you say psychedelic and people want to hear about it. They want to know, what do you know about that? Whether it's microdosing or, deep journeying with DMT or just, a recreational, intentional mushroom ceremony would be great. And then you'll laugh your ass off.
Yeah.
But you just got to be really careful. It's going to make sure that your life is manageable and you're in a safe place. Mentally and physically, emotionally and spiritually before you engage. And I think I'm excited to see where this podcast goes, buddy. I know it's going to the moon, probably
to the gods, to the gods, as Angela would say. And, one thing I love throwing in here, right, is, I know if I was listening to a lot of things like this, I might get the belief that I can't have any fun on these medicines. And actually it's the complete opposite. I want you to be able to have the most fun possible. I want you to double over laughing so hard that you cry like a 5-year-old, right? And that happens when we ensure that our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual planes of health are in order, right? Yeah. And that we're being responsible. We're being conscious with our use. So by no means are Eddie or I, either of us, saying that you can't laugh and have a good time on these medicines. It's more so be ready for anything. Because I know for me, I went into this originally 10 years ago when I started experimenting. I'm going to take some shrooms, watch a funny movie, and laugh my ass off, right? And then all of a sudden emotions hit me and I'm wanting to cry and I'm around people that I don't feel safe with. And then it's then that emotion gets stored. You don't get to actually release that trauma. And so it just lives inside of you again and then creates physical ailments, right? And so that's one thing, that's the caveat I wanted to throw in too, is I've had an absolute blast doing psychedelic medicines. But as Joseph Campbell says, bliss is any emotion felt all the way through. So when I say I've had fun because I've sobbed for hours. I've had fun because I've laughed. I've had fun because I've been anxious as hell. I've been fun because I've been paranoid. But the reason it's become fun and bliss is because I've said, okay, whatever arises, love that. This is arising. Surrender. Love it. Exactly. And one of the translations I love is, people say do the work, right? And I like changing out work for love. Do the love, right? Like hard love, right? Like you're giving yourself hard love. Like you're giving yourself exceptionally hard, deep love. And that's what these medicines, I feel, one of the best lessons they've taught me is how to love myself unconditionally and unapologetically. And that then rubs off. And that is how we then become the medicine. Because when we are embodying love, love is the governing force of the universe. And so even if someone is around you and isn't doing any of this work, they're going to pick up and start being happier around you. And so if anyone's listening thinking, I'm just one person, what can I do? You could change the whole world, one person at a time, right? And that's what we're all doing. And so for anyone listening, this is Return of the Jedi happening in living color, right? The more people that connect to their hearts and get back to what human beings really are, which is pure unconditional love put in condition to have an experience in 3D reality, that is how we heal the planet, one person at a time. And that is what's so great about having technology, right? And having these things that can spread messages, right? For anyone listening, that's what Pay It Forward is, right? Do one small thing every day out of pure service for someone else and watch how your life transforms in front of your very eyes.
Send it.
Full sendero. So dude, I'm curious, where can people find you, to connect with you, to chat with you, to find out about all the things you have going on, to find out about your new podcast you're releasing? I don't know if you've mentioned this in any other podcast yet. And so we're going to be the first one. This releases tomorrow. So if you want to mention a little bit about that, please go ahead and tell people what to expect. Tell people why you started it, anything. Go for it, bro.
I live in Quincy, Mass. And me and two of my brothers, we have Ice and Iron, which is a wellness workshop, community-based movement. So you can follow us on Instagram there. We have an event once a month. Sometimes we have 2 events a month. We can meet in person at one of those events. I'm also on Instagram at Chef Coach Madden. I have a busy life, taking care of family, taking care of jobs. So I'm not really as available and reachable, as some people are. I'm trying to limit my time, but Instagram's probably the best place to find me. I am releasing a podcast called Blue Collar Health, where I'm helping the workforce of this world create some some more aligned core values around holistic health. So that way they can have more energy, performance, peace, just quality all around. Good conversations. We're going to get some good people on, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited to hear from anybody who wants to chat. Reach out, follow. I'll follow you. We'll see how it goes. We'll just send it. Just keep sending it.
I like to use the word trendsetters.
Trendsetters.
Because that's what we are. We're sending trends, right? We're sending trends. We're sending this way of living that we have discovered, that many others have discovered too, that works for us. And we're like, hey, take the tips. If it works for you, awesome. If it doesn't, awesome, right?
Awesome.
Like, we're not telling you how to live or how you should live. We're just saying this is what works for us, and try it out. Let us know.
That's it.
Yeah.
Great Spirit's down for whatever.
Great Spirit is down for whatever.
If you want to be indecisive, that's fine.
Yeah.
Great Spirit will go on that ride with you. If you want to get really intentional and take some mushrooms and do some sound healing and do some oming and go barefoot in the woods and do some real deep intentional exercises where you're visualizing things that you want to create, well, let me tell you, Great Spirit might be down for that too.
Take out the mic. Great Spirit is down for that, for sure, and I love that, man. And, I have one last question for you. And that is, if someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what piece of advice would you give them to ensure the smoothest experience possible?
Take 1 hour before you take the medicine, shut off all your electronic devices, and write down on a piece of paper what you want to get out of this experience. Drink a lot of water, listen to some relaxing music without any lyrics, and just put your hands on your heart, give yourself a hug, and send yourself some love, and enjoy.
I love that, man. Dude, powerful medicine coming from the chef, So guys, from the first moment I met Eddie, we connected on a deep soul level. His ability to speak about subjects such as psychedelics in a way that captures the essence of what these substances can do, while also keeping the calm, lighthearted manner he does so well, is exactly what I feel is needed if we are to continue to bring these substances from the outdated, negative stigmas to the new science-backed mainstream we are beginning to see emerge. Eddie is a perfect reminder that the cosmic giggle is available for us at all times, and is as potent of a medicine as any psychedelic can be for us when we choose to engage life with intention and laughter. Eddie, thank you so much again for stopping by the show, and until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.
Aho.
Aho.